Hey, this is Carla.
This is Jasmine.
And you're listening to
Cracking the Coconut, where we tackle taboo conversations in the Filipino community.
By cracking one coconut at a time. Hey, welcome to the pilot episode of Cracking the Coconut. It feels so good. My voice almost cracked like puberty because I'm so damn excited. It feels so good to be putting this out into the world for everyone. It just feels like we've been planning this for so long. Jazz, how do you feel?
Yeah, I'm excited as well. I'm kind of nervous actually, but at the same time, it's excitement nerves, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I'm excited. We've worked so hard on this podcast and we've really taken our time to present it to you guys. So here's our baby and we're presenting you our child.
Yeah, like Jazz said, it's been months. We've been planning this and we had this initial idea and we didn't just want to start recording because we were excited. We didn't just want to put out content willy-nilly. And who the fuck says a willy-nilly?
Oh no, I never heard that before.
But we didn't just want to put it out there. We wanted to really take our time. Jazz and I, we both have a background in events and we've done different shoots. And when it comes to a smooth event or a smooth photo shoot, you need to do a lot of prep, a lot of pre-production. And that's what a lot of what we did before this initial. So now to say, welcome to the pilot episode of Cracking the Coconut feels so damn good.
Yeah, it feels amazing.
I'm kind of horny, just a little bit.
Can we talk about, preparation? If we talk about this hair right here, this fresh hair.
Hello.
It's beautiful.
Thank you so much. I did it just for this pilot. Actually, no. Well, I've been dyeing my hair for over 10 years now. So this is just like my hair. But anyways, continuing on. What the fuck is Cracking the Coconut?
So Cracking the Coconut is a podcast where we're going to give you all some mindful discussion through unfiltered, open-minded, safe space conversations.
That is totally correct. So our mission is to tackle taboo conversations within the Filipino community in hopes to bridge the gap between Filipino-Americans and Filipinos back home. Think of a coconut. Picture the coconut. Close your eyes and think about this beautiful, round, tropical ball fruit in your hands. The hard shell is the taboo topic. And the yummy, delectable juice, the yummy meat, the pulp that you so want and strive for and thrive for, that's the enlightenment or the information in order to be better and to know better, in order to bridge the gap. So that's cracking the coconut essentially.
Yeah. And, when we were coming up with the podcast and the ideas of what we wanted to present in our platform, we're in conversation. I told Carla, it's kind of like cracking the coconut. You got to crack the coconut to get to the idea or, the meat of the conversation, like Carla said. And it kind of just stuck. We're just like, wait, say that again. I was like, cracking the coconut. She's like, okay, that's it. So, that became our name. And, I actually told her about this this movie called The Debut. It's a Filipino movie that came out in 2001, and it was starring Dante Basco.
Filipino king. Oh, I guess, yeah. Here's the thing. It's 2021. Anybody can be anything.
Exactly. So
anyways,
queen, king, royalty.
Continue.
Filipino royalty. So in the movie, his friends go up to him and say, hey, you're a coconut. And he's like, what are you talking about? What's a coconut? And he's like, you're brown on the outside and you're white on the inside. And he's like, wait, what? And he's like, I've never heard that. I don't know what it means. But as the movie continues, he realizes, I don't know nothing about my Filipino culture and I don't really embrace it. So that's where the coconut idea came in. Good movie.
We were talking about cracking the coconut. We were talking about everything during pre-production, what it could be, all of our ideas. And she said, it's like cracking the coconut. And I asked her to repeat herself because I was like, wait, what the fuck? Say that again. And it really triggered me because she told me the terminology, the definition of everything. I never really heard this. I mean, I've heard banana. I've heard, yellow on the outside, white on the inside. I've heard different things like that. I never heard coconut before. And it reminded me of the time with one of my first cousins growing up. He called me whitewash.
Hi, Casey.
Called him out. I was so fucking offended. I was so mad, but the damage had been done. Obviously, I defended myself and I was like, bitch, do you not see this brown, beautiful skin? The fact that I had chicken adobo slapped in my face this morning by your mom? I am Filipino. And And I was just like, why would you call me whitewash? And he simply said, Carla, you're so basic. You're white on the inside, brown on the outside. And yeah, I like to dabble in PSLs. You know, yes, I did wear Hollister in high school and Ugg boots. But that doesn't make me any less of a Filipino.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah.
So for those of you who don't know, the Philippines is a country in Southeast Asia. It's an archipelago.
And I could never say that word. Sometimes I could say it. Sometimes I'm like, archipelago, Artatica,
Archipelago.
Archipelago.
There you go. It's a big moment for her. She's been trying. So it's an archipelago, which is essentially a group of islands. And in the Philippines, they have over 7,000 islands. And it's broken up in 3 areas. You have Luzon to the north, the Visayas in the central area, and then Mindanao, which is in the bottom portion of the country. And also, the Philippines has over 120 languages, official languages. And I personally know I don't know, how many do you know?
I know of 4.
4? Okay,
Yeah.
that's pretty standard, I guess. But they have over 120 languages. But the 2 languages that are actually the most prominent in the Philippines are Tagalog and then English. So the Philippines is actually in the top 5 of the English-speaking countries in the world.
Oh, 100%. Like, if you were to go to the Philippines to vacation and you didn't download Rosetta Stone, Duolingo, Dua Lipa, Dula Peep, whatever it is to learn Tagalog, it's okay because there is a lot of people that speak English and I feel like you're going to be fine. But continuing on a little bit of history of the Philippines is actually a trade stop island, which means that a lot of the things that you know about the Philippines today, a lot of the things about the culture, whether that's through food, through fashion, through religion, the school system even, it's all influenced by a bunch of different countries, which I think is really cool. One of which is India. They traded spices. So yeah, or the lumpia, the Filipino lumpia, it's essentially an egg roll. And I think that's freaking dope. So a lot of things that you know today about the Philippines, if you know anything about the Philippines, it's inspired by a lot of these other countries.
Yeah. And even though with the lumpia, they call it Shanghai, which is like Shanghai. So I always thought that was interesting growing up too.
Yeah, no, me too. So why the fuck does Cracking the Coconut exist? Why does this podcast exist? And why should you listen to it? Well, the main reason is because these conversations need to be had. A lot of these conversations within the Filipino community, whether that's between really good Filipino friends, maybe it's in family, a lot of these topics aren't talked about. They're taboo. No one wants to discuss them. It's kind of, if you bring it up, they're like, no, don't talk about that. That's really bad. That's, you never. And one of the things that isn't talked about within the Filipino community a lot is mental health, for example.
Big taboo.
Big taboo. And mental health is so important, especially now during this time where it's a lot easier and a more known thing to do, to be very open about your mental health. Unfortunately, we've seen a lot of people, a lot of celebrities who have unfortunately fallen and succumbed to their mental health and their depression. And within the Filipino community, sometimes you say, I need help, or I need therapy. There's a lot of people who gonna deem you crazy, that think you might off yourself. They don't want to talk about it, or they simply devalue or discredit the way you feel by saying, how can you be depressed? You're so happy. You have to be happy. Look at where you live.
Yeah, you have everything, or just it's in your head. You can fix it. You can just don't think about it. But it's not that simple.
Yeah, and a lot of these conversations are really important to really strengthen and empathize and to really, really reinforce these connections and the relationship you have, and not just within the Filipino-Americans and Filipinos back home, but Filipinos and their friends, their family, or even Filipinos here in the US and the relationship with the Filipinos who live in London or Australia or Dubai.
Exactly. And on the topic of, mental health and self-care, this podcast comes at a special time because it's in the news right now, there's a lot of reported cases of Asian hate crimes, Asian American hate crimes as well. Yeah. And, that's something that's really hard to talk about to anybody, and even to just accept, like walking out the door and feeling fearful, and And, with this platform, we want to bring, insight and humanize the experiences of, not only Filipinos, but for anyone who just comes across it and brings like more, motivation for themselves, more confidence in themselves, and because that's the only way that's going to connect us together is if we just empathize as well and have a better understanding.
Oh, yeah, 100%. And the thing that really astonishes me is that there are so many people who love Asian culture, whether that's through food, watching anime, listening to K-pop, diving into some karaoke and going to karaoke bars in K-Town in downtown LA. There's a lot of people who appreciate Asian culture and what we bring to the table, but they don't want us sitting with them. And I think that's kind of fucked up.
Yeah, it's very fucked up.
So what sparked the seed of cracking the coconut? Why did we come up with this idea? How did this idea come to be? Well, an incident happened in summer of 2020, which I like to call Barkada 2020. And essentially what happened was these 4 white guys from DC decided to open up a bar called Barkada. And for those that don't know, Barkada is a Spanish-derived word, which really, it means boatload. But there is such a deeper meaning behind it. Essentially what had happened in the past was boatloads of Filipino prisoners were taken from their home and shipped away from their native homeland. And these boatloads of Filipino form heavy and strong bonds and a family, so that way they could help each other survive enslavement and survive colonization. And the fact that these 4 white guys decided to call their wine bar Barkada and water down this meaning, it's freaking astonishing. And it's like, it's appalling what it is. And when it comes to the Filipino culture and your Barkada, you don't just call anybody that. It's a very, very endearing term. You only give it to your true homies, your ride or dies. Honestly, if Fast and Furious were in Filipino and they're like ride or die,
that's the Barkada right there.
That's the Barkada. That's the fucking Barkada.
The Toretto Barkada.
The Toretto Barkada. But yeah, that's essentially what it was. And we had done our research. So when we were looking into this, we were thinking, okay, maybe they lived in the Philippines, or maybe they're really embracing our culture. But none of that happened.
Yeah, none of that. So when we found out about this story, Carla and I jumped on Facebook and Instagram to kind of read the comments and see what people's perspective were. And for us, it was complete appropriation because there wasn't any representation of Filipinos. Their decorations weren't Filipino. Their food wasn't Filipino. No chefs were Filipino. And not even their wine. Their alcohol was Filipino. So that was already a big red flag there. And as we're going through the comments, we see that it's complete like 50-50. You have people who are agreeing with us that it's appropriation and it's not right. And these people were, Filipino-Americans and some Filipinos from the Philippines.
Yeah.
But the opposing side of opinion was Filipinos from the Philippines saying, wait, what's wrong with that? They're not doing anything wrong.
Yeah.
Let them do it. Just let them have it. But no. There's nothing to be proud about that.
Yeah.
If you want representation of in America of Filipino anything, go do your research.
Yes.
Hire staff that's Filipino. Decorate it with decorate things by a Filipino interior designer. Let it represent what actual Filipino culture is. And then maybe I'll give you that respect.
Yeah. You know what's fucking crazy is, mind you, this all happened right in the middle of the Black Lives Matter movement. We were going through these comments and having discussions with all these other Filipinos. And like Jazz said, there was a lot of people on our side. We were all, this is appropriation. This is not appreciation whatsoever. And then the other side of it was these Filipinos, either in the Philippines or older generation Filipinos who moved out to the US at a later age, just thought it was completely, they thought it was appreciation, and they kept calling us social justice warriors, and they kept declaring that we were trying to be like the Black community. And they were saying, all these kids want to do is be like Black people. They want to be oppressed so bad. They're social justice warriors. And the way they were saying it, it sounded as if it came from a place of belittlement. There was anti-Black microaggressions within that, as if being Black was an issue.
Yeah.
Or fighting for your rights and fighting for something that was right. And they were comparing us and saying, this issue, quote unquote issue you have about these 4 white guys calling their bar Barkada is not a real issue in comparison to the other fucked up shit happening within the Filipino community.
Yeah. And we're gonna go on to more detail of Barkada, but I do want to note that no one's trying to take anybody else's pain.
Yes, 100%.
If anything, what it should do is really humble us and just empathize with anybody else, because everyone has their own struggle.
Yeah.
Filipinos have their own struggle. Black people have their own struggle. Latinos have their own struggle. And that's the thing. Like, I don't know how it is, obviously, to live in the Philippines. I've visited a couple times, but I know what it is to feel excluded.
Yeah.
And I don't know if Filipinos back home in the Philippines can really understand that.
Yeah. And the thing about the Filipino community and it's one of my favorite traits, is that there is such beautiful camaraderie and connection with Filipino people. You could be walking down the street, you meet a Filipino, and there's already a connection there. And then you get to talking and you start speaking to each other about where you're from. If you're from the same region, if you speak the same language from the Philippines.
Or if you eat sinigang.
And what kind of sinigang? Like, oh, you like pork sinigang too? Like, bitch, I do too. There is such beautiful camaraderie. But during this time of Barkada 2020, we didn't see any of that. There was such a huge divide, and it really opened our eyes, because I thought, oh, we're all Filipino. We're all going to be on the same side of this thing. It's going to be okay. We're going to help each other. We're going to help defend each other. But no, there was such a huge divide. It was crazy.
Yeah. And that's one of our goals, is to just make sure everybody is on the same page of understanding. Because our experiences as Filipino-Americans, and then also their experiences as Filipinos in the homeland, are very, very different.
100%. And I mean, I guess if we're going to thank white people for anything, it might as well be planting this seed in my head, in our heads, and colonizing our brains and, kind of giving us this idea. So Jasmine and I are both Filipino-Americans, but despite that, we have very, very different experiences. We met working in Los Angeles radio, and together we have a combined 13 years of working within the entertainment industry. And the last place we both worked together in LA radio, we were in a corporate building on Miracle Mile in mid LA or mid Wilshire. And out of 250, 275 employees during that time, I have no idea now because COVID, there was only 5 Filipinos working there out of all those employees.
Facts.
5. And I was just like, man, this is fucking crazy. There's only 5 of us here. Jasmine, why don't you go ahead and tell our viewers, our listeners, a little bit about yourself. Jasmine, who the actual fuck are you?
Well, that's a loaded question, Carla. I would like to say that I am constantly growing and learning because that's life. And if you're not doing that, you're not living. You know what I mean?
Ooh, put that on a t-shirt, Dr. Seuss.
I straight up thought you were going to call me Dr. Sue. I don't know. So I was born and raised in San Francisco. And, my family roots, I'm 3/4 Bisaya. So we're from Cebu, Samar, and Leyte. And I'm a quarter Ilocano. So my grandma's from La Union. And luckily I know what those mean and where we're from. I've actually visited most of those places. But my family, we weren't born. My family, it wasn't a tradition.
I hope you were born. How did you come through? You know what I mean? Alien.
We showed up.
Oh, shit.
We just popped up from the ground. So my family, I didn't grow up in a traditional Filipino household. And my parents immigrated to America when they were in junior high.
Okay.
So they grew up in their early teens and high school in, America. And they were, assimilated into American society. So it wasn't like the traditional strict household with, traditions and things like that. And so when it came to Filipino culture, I wasn't really aware of that. All I knew was the language because they actually taught me Bisaya. My grandparents taught me Bisaya, Cebuano when I was growing up. And that was actually my first language. And other than that, there wasn't anything Filipino that was very strong for me other than maybe like hanging out with my family or hearing my family speak in Bisaya.
Yeah. Okay. So because you didn't grow up in a traditional Filipino home, did you face any identity issues growing up? Like, was there ever a moment when you thought to yourself, I'm not American enough, or I'm too Filipino for this, or anything like that? Like while you were just living life?
Yeah, for the most part, I didn't really face any identity issues. However, there was this one, situation that I do remember, and I was in kindergarten. So for kindergarten, I went to school in Fairfield, up in the Bay Area, and at the time, it was a very suburban town with a lot of white people. And so my sister and I, we both got invited to this party, and the party was for this white girl. And I remember we went to the party and we're all hanging out, and I thought everything's all fun and games. And, the girls start going up to the room. And it's just a bunch of white girls.
Okay.
So my sister and I...
Sounds like trouble.
It sounds boring.
Okay, continue. Sorry.
So we're going up to the room with them, and my sister and I and our friend, she's black girl, and we're all excited, and all of a sudden they close the fucking door on us. Yeah. And
like they just slammed it. They were like, no brown people.
I mean, they didn't say no brown people, but they legit just closed the door on us for no reason.
We're trying to tan.
There's a tanning bed like on the corner. Anyway, so my sister and I and our friend, we look at each other like, okay, like, did they do that on purpose?
Yeah.
And I think in that moment, from what I remember, it's like, it wasn't anything to do with being Filipino, but it was more so like we're different. The three of us are different than these white girls. And so I remember when I was younger too, I asked my mom, like, Mom, why don't I have yellow hair? Why don't I have blue eyes? And she probably said, it's the way God made you. But at that point, I really didn't understand, like, why wasn't I this? Why am I different?
Yeah.
So that was, a moment where I kind of questioned like my identity. And I think as a young kid, it's also confusing.
Yeah, for sure.
So when I started working in radio, so I worked out in San Francisco for a little bit. There was a couple Filipinos that I was working with. And then when I went to LA, I actually didn't think that I was going to come across any Filipinos working in radio at all. And, when I found there was a couple Filipinos working there and you were working there, but you had this other job that was not promo, street team, like office work. You're actually a videographer and photographer. And she's really dope. You need to go check her shit out. Very, very talented. jcallmecarla.com.
Wow, thanks for the plug. I'll give you your $120 and some new Jordans.
Perfect.
Tomorrow.
It's hard times. I will gladly accept it. That was an ad.
Wait, real quick though. You didn't think you were going to see any other Filipinos while working in LA radio. Why did you think that was? Or why did you feel like, oh, I'm going to be the only Filipino again?
Yeah, I guess because, in entertainment, especially working behind the scenes, you don't see a lot of Filipinos in the mix because it's not a career that a lot of Filipinos pursue, in my experience. Like a lot of Filipinos are pushed to do other careers that make that money fast. Like when you leave school, you jump into the career, you make that money. Yeah. And that's what's important. But I don't really know a lot of Filipinos that, or at the time, I didn't really know a lot of Filipinos that, strive for careers that made them really happy.
Gotcha.
But they could be creative and, money wasn't really a factor. But enough about me. She, like I'm telling you, she had a dope ass job. This girl was shooting behind the scenes at some of the biggest concerts out in LA. And she was in that damn pit with her camera, all 5 foot of her amongst the trees.
The trees.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody. I'm Carla. You will hear me before you see me because I'm just a loud person.
She's very loud.
I'm just a very, very loud and very enthusiastic about everything. Everything. Tupperware, enthusiasm, always. But anyway, so
Pens. Don't even get her started.
Oh my gosh. Pens are I'm so persnickety about my fucking pens. Anyways, continuing on. I was born in the Philippines. I was born in Tarlac, Philippines, but I actually immigrated to the US in the 90s after the eruption of Mount Pinatubo. I grew up in a very traditional Filipino home, unlike Jasmine. So I was in a very protective bubble. I was not allowed to do anything. Wanted to go to the mall? Not fucking happening. Even simple things like breakfast. I wasn't eating Lucky Charms or Frosted Flakes or anything sugary. Our breakfasts tend to be more salty and savory. So garlic fried rice, eggs, ramen, red sausages, longanisa, which is a Filipino sweet sausage. Anyways, we went to...
For anybody who's wondering, that was her...
mating call.
For food, I guess.
And I kind of lived everywhere. My dad was in the Air Force for 21 years.
Wow.
And so I've lived in a bunch of different cool places. I've loved them all equally. I've lived in Japan. I've lived in San Antonio, Texas. I've lived in a bunch of different cities in California. And it was honestly a really fun time.
So you mentioned that you lived in so many different places, including Japan, which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
I think that's a really unique factor about you or unique fact about you. So when you lived in these places, did you notice that you were Filipino?
Okay. So growing up, I knew I was Filipino, but it wasn't like a defining trait about me. It was just like a regular, oh, my hair's black, I have brown eyes, I happen to be Filipino. It wasn't anything super amazingly spectacular about me. It was just part of who I was, and that was that. And I grew up around a bunch of different ethnicities and different races and colors and peoples and religion. And honestly, as long as we vibed, as long as you were nice to me, we got along on the playground. That was all I saw growing up. And I didn't really see in my face Filipino until I actually moved to Fremont, California, which, if you don't know, it's a city up in the Bay Area in California. And I was the new kid. And there was this girl in one of my classes. She pulls me off to the side and she's like, hey, Carla, you're the new girl. Do you have anyone to sit with during lunch, hang out with? You can come kick it with my crew. And I thought that was so nice. So of course I took the offer. I said, yes, I'd love to make some friends while I'm out here. And side note, I thought Californians were stupid when I first moved to Fremont, because everyone was because I had just moved from Texas. So everyone was asking me, oh, did you ride horses to school? And I was just like, do you ride surfboards to school? Like, what the fuck? I was just like, all of y'all are so dumb. I was like, who asked? Anyways, continuing on.
I think that's really funny, but also kind of interesting because it's like we all might live in the same country, but we have these perceptions of different states and how the lifestyle is in those states.
Anyways, but continuing on, this group of people I meet, and I thought they were so bizarre, and not bizarre in like they were just weird and picking their nose and eating it bizarre, but bizarre in a sense that they were all Filipino. And that was when it was in my face. And you're probably listening to this thinking, what the hell is wrong with Filipinos being friends? They were probably barkada, you know what I mean? But I just thought it was so weird because I grew up around so many different ethnicities, so many different kinds. And so when I met this group of people in Fremont, I was like, this is really fucking weird. It made me kind of uncomfy, to be honest. I was just like, I don't know if I can handle this. And the cool thing was that they were able to sense my uncomfiness. So they kind of booted me out of the group. And they finessed it. They did it in a really creative, kind of cool, kind of slightly fucked up, but I'm not mad about it way. So what had happened was that the girl, she took me to go see this other group. And they were like, Carla, you know Cynthia from theater class. You guys are nice. You guys should kick it. And I was like, oh yeah, hey Cynthia. And so I started hanging out with this new group. And I didn't realize I got booted out of the Filipino group until that girl walked away and left me there to defend myself with this group. I was like, what the fuck? Did that actually happen? But thankfully, this new group, they were so cool. And what was crazy about it, and the reason why I felt comfortable suddenly, was because they were all different ethnicities. And it was just like a really cool group. And thinking back on it, I'm not exactly sure why I felt so uncomfortable with that Filipino group. But I think at the time, I wasn't connected to my Filipino culture yet. As a preteen, that's when I started to notice that there wasn't a lot of representation in the mainstream media when it came to Filipinos or just Asians in general.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the books I read, the TV shows I would watch, the media I consumed, there was a bunch of white people all the time.
Yeah. You know, real quick, if I remember the first Filipino I ever saw on television that I felt was representative of me was actually in, I think, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the second one,
Yes!
with Ernie Reyes Jr. And I was like, oh shit, he's Filipino.
Yeah.
That's cool. But I guess I didn't also realize how rare that was to see somebody who was Filipino on like a really strong role.
Yeah. And here's the thing. So I grew up watching Liz McGuire. Honestly, Hilary Duff was my sexual awakening. So her best friend, if you don't know, Liz McGuire is a show from the early 2000s on the Disney Channel. It's honestly
a classic.
It's a classic. It's top-notch media. It's amazing. So Lizzie's best friend is this girl named Miranda Sanchez, and she is depicted as a Hispanic girl on the show. And then I ended up, so the actress who plays Miranda, her name is Lalaine. She's Filipino. And I didn't know she was Filipino until I actually went to one of her concerts at the Milpitas Mall up in Northern California. And she had mentioned something about being Filipino, and my jaw dropped. My jaw went down to my knees like my titties went down to my knees without a bra. I was gobsmacked. I was like, what, this whole entire time? Miranda was Filipino?
Yeah, I think she was Mexican in that show. And the thing is, like, if they knew she was Filipino, why couldn't they have represented her as a Filipino person?
Yeah.
What was the loss of doing that?
Yeah.
You know, there could have been more gain. Is it because maybe Filipinos just weren't mainstream enough?
Yeah. And see, that was the issue. That I think that was part of the issue of my disconnect with the Filipino heritage, my Filipino culture, because I didn't have representation in the media I consumed. On top of living in a very toxic Filipino home, I couldn't find the puzzle pieces to connect, to have a strong, bold, beautiful relationship with my culture. You know, now I am. If you were to meet me now, you would know that I'm a very proud Filipino person. I love being Filipino. This brown skin is fucking beautiful, and I love every piece of it. But it took a lot of years, a lot of unlearning, a lot of unpacking, and a lot of just realizing who I am and realizing how dope it is to be Filipino.
Yeah.
And how fucked up it was, really, truly, that I didn't have the representation. Speaking of connectivity, Jazz, do you feel connected to your Filipino culture at all?
Yeah, so I actually never truly felt connected to my Filipino culture, you know, or whatever it means to be Filipino. You know, aside from learning the language, like I mentioned earlier, with my family teaching me at a young age. But I think it's also because I don't know Tagalog culture. And the language, you know, Tagalog is the main language in the Philippines. And, you know, until recently as well, I was listening to this Filipino platform, and there's a Filipino-American platform. It was on social media. And, you know, like nowadays I try to engage and, you know, immerse myself in platforms to kind of understand my culture and my roots. But a little bit into it, I felt really, really disconnected. And it kind of caught me off guard because it felt like I didn't belong. And it kind of, I don't know if it didn't hurt, but it kind of like stung because it was confusing to me, you know?
Was it because they were speaking in Tagalog or saying jokes that you didn't understand, maybe because you weren't immersed in Filipino culture growing up?
Yeah, I think it was all of that, to be honest. Mainstream Tagalog, like, kind of culture. There's little quirks and little habits and sayings. You know, a lot of people use like Taglish, so it's a mixture of Tagalog and English, and I don't understand it, so I don't get it. My family is not Tagalog, so that's why it's hard to connect. And, you know, I think it's important for me now as an adult. What I've been trying to do is research more on the Philippines, learn more about it, learn more about heritage and roots and culture, because, you know, it's really important. And I think I was really inspired by what happened over the summer of 2020, where, you know, there's all these marches and protests and people just standing up for themselves, especially the Black community.
Yeah.
You know, and it made me want to feel closer to my roots.
Yeah.
And really know where I came from. So now I try to contact my family back in the Philippines and talk to like the older people to see more of like where my great grandparents came from. What's their story? So what I want to do is, you know, while these people are still alive, be able to reach out and talk to them and ask them the questions that are essentially very, very important.
I like that. I like that you're actively seeking information and trying to figure out more about where you came from, your roots. And I think it's important for a lot of people to figure out their roots and find out where they came from and why that is, or why your family name is this or that, or kind of like a mystery of your own family tree. And I think that's really cool. And that is what Cracking the Coconut is. It's not two Filipino-Americans, two sexy Filipino-Americans talking about taboo topics, but it's also learning and engaging and opening up the floor for discussion in order to strengthen our connections, our personal connection to our own heritage.
And it's not just for us to learn, you know, like Carla and I have two different perspectives, two different upbringings as Filipino-Americans. And like we mentioned earlier, we just want to have a better understanding of, you know, the Filipinos, to come together and really be uplifted and just really be knowledgeable about, you know, what goes on back home in the Philippines and what goes on here.
So if you liked listening or watching us and thought we're fucking amazing, and you know, you're craving a little bit more, you're yearning a little bit more of Cracking the Coconut, not to worry. Episodes 2 and 3 are actually already up. So if you like this episode and want to binge a little bit more, go ahead and do so.
And you can hit us up on social media. We're on Instagram at Cracking the Coconut. We are also on Twitter and TikTok at Cracking the Coco. We also have a website, crackingthecoconut.com, so be sure to check that out.
Yeah, definitely. And join our newsletter on crackingthecoconut.com. It's going to be a lot of fun stuff. If you sign up for this newsletter, you're going to be hit with a bunch of fun behind the scenes. We're going to start doing this thing called Filipino Feature, where we're going to feature really awesome Filipino-owned businesses or just really dope Filipino people who are exuding such excellence, and we want to highlight that. If you happen to, you know, miss an episode or forget who the Filipino feature is of the season, then you will get that roundup in our newsletter. So go ahead and join that. And
and also, you know, it won't be just us talking. So if you get sick of us, don't worry, we're gonna have guests and some really cool guests too. And can't wait for y'all to check it out.
That's basically it. That sums it up.
Yeah.
Peace.
Deuces.
Bye.